Hello and welcome back to YouTube for Healthy Adolescent Development. My name is Kaylee Cornelson. I'm a trainer, facilitator, and social worker, and your resource for all things teen health, mental health, and adolescent development. Today I'm going to talk about teaching social media responsibility and 3 key conversations to help support social media awareness for young people. This is obviously an ongoing hot topic in the world as a whole, but especially for teens and young people because social media is a huge part of their lives. You have a spectrum of approaches to how to deal with young people in social media use. So let me start off with my position, my stance on how to talk to young people about their social media use. So first and foremost, I think often adults, we can really be a little bit tech negative. And this comes from not growing up with social media, not being used to the same types of technology that young people are using, and oftentimes just being really overwhelmed by all there is to learn about technology and social media. For young people, this is another language that they speak, something they've been using since a really young age. And so it can be a little bit tricky as adults to be playing catch up in a way to understanding this world of social media. However, I would encourage any parent or any youth serving professional to try to lean into a more tech neutral or even tech positive place when you're working with young people, when you're talking to your adolescent about how they're using social media and that part of their lives. I really see social media as a tool that, yes, can be used in a negative way and to cause harm, but also can be neutral. And on the other side, can be positive, healthy, and productive. We just need to be having those conversations with the young people in our lives. So it can't be all or nothing. I'm not one of those people who's going to tell you you have to wait till a certain age to give someone a phone or to let them be on social media, because that's a little bit too simple in my mind. I think that we need to approach it as the complex topic that it is and be really individualized for each young person that either we work with or that we parent. And finally, having these conversations needs to be a two-way street. Coming in with rules and boundaries and punishments related to phones, social media can be at best frustrating for teens and at worst dangerous for teens. What I mean by dangerous is that often taking away a connection to peers, a connection to resources that young people have through their phones or through social media can take away a support system when they really need it. And so that's one other piece to keep in mind. Alternatively, having the conversation be a two-way street, leaning on young people as experts in social media use, in their own experience, getting curious about how they're using it, what they're doing with it, and what they like and don't like about it can really be a good way to open the door and start having that conversation with the young people in your life. So there are so many conversations that can be had about social media, but I want to share 3 key conversations that I think can support awareness for youth when it comes to their social media use. So first of all, boundaries. A lot of times, young people don't have a chance or don't really think about taking a step back and considering what they want their social media and phone boundaries to be. Asking themselves, do I want to follow all the same people that my friends follow? Do I want to have my notifications enabled at all times during the day? Do I want to feel like I have to respond to someone immediately or they're going to be mad at me? A lot of times young people are just kind of into doing what their peers are doing, and that becomes the norm in the community that they're in. So one great way to start the conversation is to take a step back and ask young people, what are your personal boundaries around your phone and social media? And if they haven't thought about it, it's a great time to think about it. You could also start by sharing what some of your personal boundaries are around social media, if you have them. And if you don't, you could think about it too. You could do it together. You could ask them questions about who do you like to follow? What do you like to post? What feels good and what feels stressful about using Instagram, using Snapchat, texting your friends, feeling pressure? Like, where do you feel pressure? And again, just start to have that conversation, get them thinking, and get the two of you talking about what that feels like. And again, asking them, when you take a step back from the pressure of what everybody else is doing, what's really important to you about your social media use? Again, it becomes just such a normal part of the culture. And I don't necessarily feel like we have to fight that because it is so ingrained and we're unlikely to win that battle. But better yet, let's have the conversation about what boundaries feel good and healthy for them, and know that sometimes it's hard to hold those boundaries, and that's okay too. Hopefully you can continue the conversation from there. So a couple of strategies related to that. First, brainstorm a list of social media boundaries that they would like to have. For example, I want to unfollow anyone who makes me feel bad about myself, or I'll only accept follow requests from people I know in real life, or I'm going to put my phone on do not disturb during my sports practice so I can really focus on what I'm doing there. Just a couple of examples. I would suggest putting the list in a notes app, somewhere where they can find it and refer back to it really easily, and checking in on a regular basis, like, hey, how are your boundaries going? Anything you want to change, anything you want to add, anything that doesn't feel like a good boundary. And also encouraging them to start working on setting those boundaries little by little. We know that trying to make big changes and a lot of changes all at once can oftentimes lead to failure, right? We start the new year with a long list of resolutions and maybe one of them sticks. So instead of doing a bunch all at the same time, I would recommend starting with one, seeing how it feels, adding another, seeing how it feels, and giving some grace and time in between. The second conversation that I would recommend having with young people is how social media and having their phone impacts their social life and relationships. There is no doubt that this is a huge part of young people's social life. And one way that you can think about it, if you are a millennial or older, like I am, you think about a physical place maybe you would gather when you were a teen, when you were a young person. Where did you go? Did you hang out at the mall? Did you hang out at the basketball court? Did you hang out on a bench in the middle of your small town like I did? And recognize that social media is a place where young people do the same things that we used to do in those physically grounded spaces. They flirt, they hang out, they want to see and be seen, they form their identities, they figure out who they like and they don't like. So whether or not we think it's good or better or worse that they're doing this in online spaces, that's what's happening there. And I think that, in my opinion, that's okay. Of course, we want to have a mix of both. But when we're thinking about social life on social media, a couple of conversations you might want to have are, do you feel like your relationships online are true to what they are in real life? For better or for worse, no judgment. What do you think? How are they the same? And how do they feel different? I would love to, hear those answers from a young person. Do you have any friends that you know solely from online spaces? And have you thought at all about how to make sure these people are who they say they are? That's a big concern, I think, a lot of times for adults, parents, and youth serving professionals alike. A lot of times young people have thought about that before, how to make sure that these people are who they say they are. And if they do have friends that they only know online, talk a little bit about risk reduction. How can you maintain a relationship that may be important to you, but also talk about not giving away personal information, your address, your bank account information, not sending people money, not planning to meet up unless you take an adult with you or take another safe person with you. So talking about some of those boundaries. And another conversation you might want to have is when conflict comes up with friends or romantic connections online, how do you handle it? And how does that bleed into real life spaces as well? When does it feel easier just to communicate with people online? And what do you think are the pros and cons of that? And finally, another thing I might talk about is, what do likes or follows mean to you? Does the number of likes or views impact you and how you feel about yourself or your relationships or your friendships. And again, having that conversation kind of puts the quiet part out loud so that you can help them navigate that a little bit. I do think one of the biggest downfalls of adults often being so tech negative is that we want to shut down young people using social media or really limit it, or we see it as a bad thing. And that misses an opportunity for us to talk to them about how it makes them feel, how it impacts their mental health, and how to reduce risk and do things in a more safe way. So a couple of strategies to try for young people when it comes to their social life on social media is to first think about how they can be a good friend or partner, both in online spaces and in real life, and how those two things might look different or not. Checking expectations about how often or how quickly you expect people to respond to you, and let other folks know your boundaries, going back to boundaries as well. So yeah, I don't respond to messages after 10 because my mom doesn't let me have my phone in my room. Always blame it on mom or dad or whoever your caregiver is. I love that strategy. Encourage them to try to get a good balance of spending time in person with friends and partners and connecting on online spaces. There is space for both. And get to know the warning signs of things like digital dating abuse so you can help spot those for your relationship and for your friends as well. So things like controlling who you can text, insisting on sharing locations, nonstop bombarding someone with text messages, things like that would be some of those warning signs. And then the third conversation I would encourage folks to start having is one about values. And values are something that I don't think we ask teens about very often. They are still forming, they can shift and change, and that's appropriate and normal and a wonderful thing about this time of life. But it can really, I think, help young people think about how they're showing up in person and in online spaces. So if you have a conversation about what are 2 or 3 core values that are really important to you, what are the most important things to you in life? And you can go online and find all sorts of different lists of values. I'm thinking about having those in the back of your mind. Again, writing those down in your notes app. How do those connect to how you're showing up online, how you're behaving online, or even in person as well? Does your behavior and how you're showing up align with your core values? And again, another question could be, how can you live out your values online in a way that makes you feel good about yourself? Because that does feel good, right? Aligning behavior online where sometimes it can be seen and seen and seen by many other people, and connecting that to the values really does create a sense of pride and makes folks feel good about themselves. So the strategy, as I already mentioned, is to Google a list of values and consider which ones on the list speak to you the most as your core values. I really like the list that Brene Brown has on her website. So if you do a Google on that, you can find it. And the trick is to try to pick just 2 to 3 of the most important ones and consider how you can stay true to those values, both in real life and in online spaces. So those were 3 conversation starters. If you are interested in more content like this, I have a full 3-hour training that talks all about my 10 conversation starters for healthy social media use for teens. And you can see that on my website and linked below. And you can also get a PDF handout of these 3 conversation starters and strategies, again, on my website or at the link below.